A spousal limited access trust is an irrevocable trust. Now, let's take that spousal part out and put in sibling. Spousal limited access trust, sibling limited access trust. And potentially, let's say the person who sets up the trust can say, if and when I get married, my spouse replaces my sibling. Now, I'm bringing this up just to be fun, but also to talk about irrevocable trusts a bit. So the first thing we have to think about is, what's the purpose behind this irrevocable trust? In prior videos, I mentioned estate tax planning, and an irrevocable trust is one of the options that you could consider with estate taxes. Because the idea would be that you could transfer assets to the trust in a completed fashion. So you have completed gifts into the trust to take advantage of your estate tax exemptions. And then any further growth in the assets year after year after year will not be a part of your gross estate for estate tax purposes. Now, that is an incredible benefit if you're in the estate tax consideration realm. But if that is not your consideration or concern, you're thinking about the irrevocable trust in a different way. And for tax purposes, that different way would be that you're retaining certain strings and powers over the assets such that there are no completed gifts of the assets into trust, such that the assets are part of your gross estate for estate tax inclusion purposes, such that you receive what's called a step up in basis, which is a new cost basis for the assets in trust to avoid or reduce capital gains tax consequences. So what I'm trying to get into is the idea that there is an irrevocable trust option that has benefits depending on what your needs are. And even for tax purposes, we have a split. We may want estate tax inclusion because we want to step up in basis, or we may not want estate tax inclusion, and therefore we have a different route to take. But let's get into irrevocable trust planning in general. An irrevocable trust, just like any trust, is a legal arrangement. So often people will say, I don't understand a trust. Think about this. It's paper. We have a deed. What's a deed? It's paper. We have a mortgage. What's a mortgage? It's paper. But it means something because in the context of the laws that we have, that's what we need to transfer title for purposes of the deed, or to show that there's a lien on the property for the purposes of the mortgage. And those documents are recorded in the clerk's office. But for a trust, we have paper. It's called a trust agreement, and the trust agreement remains private. It's our own little way of dealing with things. We keep it private, and that alone is a beautiful benefit of setting up an irrevocable trust. But so we have a legal arrangement, and the person setting up the trust is going to transfer ownership of assets from themselves to the trustee of the trust. And then the trustee of the trust is going to manage the trust assets according to the trust agreement. Excuse me. I cannot get rid of whatever I ate for a snack. It is bothering me. In any event, we have the trustee who is managing the trust assets according to the trust agreement. And the trust agreement will provide who are the beneficiaries. We have to have designated beneficiaries. We're thinking about who are the beneficiaries during the grantor's life and upon the grantor's passing. So grantor is the person setting up the trust, or it could be called the settlor. So that is the idea of a trust. And beyond the benefits of estate tax planning, I want people to see that there are other reasons why they want to set up or may want to set up an irrevocable trust. Now, one of the big benefits of setting up an irrevocable trust, and pretty much what most people think about, is asset protection. So we could think about this in a couple of ways. One is there are risks into the future. We could lose our capacities. Our spouse could lose her capacities. We could have a power of attorney acting under a power of attorney doing the wrong thing for us. They either just don't know, they didn't have the right instructions, they thought this is what you wanted, or they're doing the wrong thing, or they're heavily influenced by somebody else. So that's one aspect of risks into the future. But we also have the unknown risk of potential creditors into the future. And potential creditors are broad, from a lawsuit out of the blue to potential care for ourselves, nursing home needs, and so on. We just never know what the future could hold. And if you're thinking of setting up a trust to avoid some of these risks, the irrevocable trust is the powerful option. Unlike a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust is not easily changed, amended, altered, revoked. And it's really setting in stone your intentions. And maybe only in certain limited circumstances can some certain individuals take some actions that are needed at the time. But other than that, it's irrevocable. And that has great benefit when you think about some of the risks into the future. So for that reason, it's creating this financial stability for yourself and your loved ones. Now, who's going to benefit from the trust? You're thinking as far as your needs into the future, what assets are in the trust, and you can think about the income from assets that are in the trust, and then the principal of assets that are in the trust. You can think about benefiting various beneficiaries, either with income or principal or both. But I just wanted to bring out this idea that an irrevocable trust is a beautiful planning opportunity for people when they're thinking about creating stability into the future without certain risks involved. And a lot of all of this, as always, depends. It depends on who you're planning for. Is it just yourself? Is it yourself and a spouse? What are the concerns? Who are the people involved? And, what do you feel comfortable with? And even when you think about setting up an irrevocable trust, you're not thinking of parting with all of your assets in most cases. You're thinking of maybe putting certain assets in trust for certain reasons. Let me just bring out one example. Some people will do what they think is simple planning, and sometimes will do a deed transferring ownership of their home to children, retain a life estate interest. Well, if the home is sold during that person's life, there are capital gains tax concerns for both sets. So you have the children and for the parent, and that can be avoided if you set up an irrevocable trust and transfer the home to the irrevocable trust. So you're thinking about these risks into the future again, and really wanting to plan to avoid risks. And as long as I'm talking about this, I will just mention that with an irrevocable trust, you can use the grantor's social security number for trust tax purposes. So we don't need a separate trust tax return. We can set it up such that the social security number of a grantor or one of the grantors can be used. And that could be very beneficial. So I think there's so much to talk about here. I just wanted to bring out a little bit more in regard to irrevocable trust planning. I hope this did help. This is Ruth George with Ruth P. George Law, PLLC, trust and estate attorney. This video, as always, is just meant to give you some educational ideas, but you always want to go and work with your attorney in regard to your goals, concerns, and legal needs. I am going to try and drink some water now to take care of whatever I have stuck in there. And I hope to see you on another video.